Hey, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions, here with my uncut review of the series premiere of My Adventures with Superman, the animated series on, I think, Adult Swim and formerly known as HBO Max. The synopsis on IMDb reads, Clark Kent builds his secret Superman identity, and embraces his role as the hero of Metropolis while sharing adventures and falling in love with Lois, a star investigative journalist who also takes Jimmy Olsen under her wing. Okay, so what is the basic tone, vibe, who's the audience maybe for this thing? I think it has a very Saturday morning kind of tone. It leans into comedy to the point where logic is sacrificed for gags. So there's inconsistency in logic in like what Superman can do, how capable he is versus how klutzy he is, different things like that, to feed into the gags and the comedy, which is pretty frequent throughout. The first two episodes, they kind of build up, and by the end, you've got some pretty serious action going on for the climax, but all the other spots, there's a lot of comedy going through the whole thing. The animation and performance style is also over the top with touches of anime style facial expressions. It's a solid action, though, in the climax of both the episodes. I would say, though, that the overall tone, if you are a person of a certain age like me, then you might remember like the 90s Marvel shows like X-Men, Spider-Man, the DC shows like Superman, Batman, that kind of stuff. I would say those certainly had a more serious tone than this one does. It seems intended as an entry into Superman, an introduction to Superman for elementary ages and possibly junior high, although certainly there are going to be people who say, hey, I'm older and I like it, for their own reasons. But I think the target audience is that mid to late elementary and maybe junior high as well. Clark, Lois, and Jimmy are Daily Planet interns, so they are also aged down quite a bit. I'm sure to help make them just a little bit more relatable, a little closer to the age of the intended audience. Clark is also not Superman at the start and has little to no control over his powers, seemingly. He's touching things and breaking things all over the place and kind of nervous about it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going to kill people. Well, if this was a story that was treated logically, then yes, he would very much be in danger of killing people. We'd probably see that happen. But like I said, his power levels, his control, just the logic overall of the characters and their behavior, their capabilities and stuff is really thrown out the window in favor of the comedy. Because certainly halfway through the first episode, you don't see him breaking stuff that he's touching anymore. He's very in command of his body and his ability to be gentle with things and with people. Speaking of his powers, there's also hints, more than hints, there's a demonstration of some kind of a power burst that Superman gets in times of great need. There's an opening scene where it happens as a kid, and then we see it happen in a couple instances in the first two episodes as a young adult. And it seems similar, though not quite the same, to the burst of power that the New 52 Superman could get, and that now Superman's son, John Kent, also calling himself Superman, that he's capable of getting now and then. So it seems in the neighborhood of that. It's not exactly the same as either one of those, but that, along with other small modifications to the lore, like the nature of the ship that Superman arrived in being much bigger or able to grow or whatever it looks. I don't know if the Fortress of Solitude is going to be built under the Kent farm, or there's just some interesting things that they're doing with the lore that take them off the path of the traditional concept that I think longtime fans might find a little bit interesting. And they are at least slightly writing for long-term fans, because there's little references, like in the second episode, Jimmy Olsen starts an online vlog or something, or a stream, and his username is Flamebird, and that's even before my time. I mean, they've resurrected the idea of Jimmy Olsen as Flamebird, but that goes way back to Superman and Jimmy going on adventures in the bottled city of Kandor, where Superman operated using the name Nightwing, and Jimmy Olsen operated using the name Flamebird, and they were kind of like superheroes in the little miniature bottled city of Kandor. And that's like, whoa, that is a deep cut reference, even for someone like me in their mid-40s. So I'm not sure like who that's for. Maybe it's for like, I don't know, the grandparents and parents of those who might end up watching this with younger viewers. Speaking of the older generation, Ma and Pa Kent are alive, which I really appreciate, and they're involved in some sweet moments with Clark, both in flashbacks and in present day. And Clark and Lois's budding romance is also handled endearingly, and I suspect, given the audience, it's not going to get hot and heavy. It's just going to be kind of awkward and sweet, and I'm on board for that. Clark is also more of a nerd than I've seen him written to be in a long time, but it's not an act. It's who he is. That's kind of like this version of the character is the nerdy, awkward, socially awkward guy is who Clark is. And he sort of is able to snap into a friendly, gentle comfort with people in his brief moments speaking as Superman. But the insecure, awkward guy is who he really is. And this kind of like concept of Superman as a complete character works well for me, especially if Superman doesn't stay around to talk. Because I think that's when some of that awkwardness is liable to start surfacing, and he's not putting on an act as Superman, but I think he's just so in the mode and such a good guy and really wanting to help people and really feels a sense of fulfillment in those moments when he's helping people that his insecurity at those times seems to melt away. That would be my attempt at a psychological profile for what's going on. Although, like I said, this isn't written to be taken psychologically seriously. As far as the cast goes, very little to say. You know, the voice acting is dialed up to 11. Very standard Saturday morning kind of vibe, not my thing at all. But they all seem to be doing, what they're supposed to do for this kind of product. And I do think the tone of Clark's voice, the casting there, I think is really fitting. Let's see, as far as the visuals go, it's not the best animation. Backgrounds lack the detail I'd really like to see. And movement has that anime choppiness that I'm not really into. I like animation to have a lot more frames involved in the movement of people and objects and things like that, but the target audience is probably not going to really notice that or be bothered by it. As far as themes, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? Well, there's themes of coming of age in a broad sense, and of figuring out your place in the world. Lois is clearly looking for her significance in her career, and is just like mowing people down next to her in order to achieve that goal. Meanwhile, Clark is in both of these first two episodes asking, who am I? And he's really troubled by not knowing the answer to that question and feels really driven to explore what the answer is, even though he's afraid of what those answers might be and how they will change him. Below the surface of both of these characters and their story arcs and the themes, whether the writers know it or not, is the issue of purpose. What am I supposed to do in life? Why am I here? What am I built for? And what should my life be about? And that is, of course, not leaned into or spelled out enough to likely stimulate thought or conversation, given the nature of the script and its target audience. But it's still, I think, an entry point, potentially, to thinking about or discussing those themes, maybe with younger viewers that you're watching this show with. Now, I have no idea what your tastes are in animated shows, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, skip this one. The overall tone's not for you. If one of your boys decided on their own that they wanted to watch the show, then, you'd want to watch it with them, and you'd find a few things mildly interesting enough that, it wouldn't be torture to watch it, and there'd be a few tidbits here and there that you'd go, oh, okay, that's kind of neat, 5 years ago would have been a better fit. But I think Superman and Lois is a far more likely Superman show to watch with your boys these days. My Adventures with Superman is rated TV PG for violence. And those are all of my thoughts for now on the series premiere, episodes 1 and 2 of My Adventures with Superman. Right now, I'd like to take some time to write a tune for pre-made rhyme. The lyrics kind of never change, but the melody gets rearranged. I never know what I'll create to say how much I appreciate Dan Axel, Gabriel Stinson, Brian Franklin, Olin D. Branham, Winston Crutchfield, Lee Bray, Justin D. Myers, Joel Nelson, and Scruffosaurus. Thank you for supporting me and SBP. That's a better note. SBP and CGC. And now to all who hear this tune, thank you as well. Please come back soon. Want to hear your name and song? Check out our page on Patreon. All right. I'd love to get your thoughts and reactions, as always, in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell, do the cool stuff that you know how to do. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insider so much for making this review possible. You can get info about the benefits of joining over at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Then I hope you'll check out our podcast and stay connected to all the CGC content we've got going on that you can find at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.